It's
So,
AdWords.
okay, sorry. You should call yourself Google Ads Girl.
No, I call myself AdWords Girl because AdWords is what it's called. I don't care.
Thanks for everyone for joining us. My name is Beverley Theresa, and I'm a social media strategist. This is our show, Marketing Beat, and this is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Ameet. I've got about 9 years of experience in pay-per-click advertising.
Today, we're going to be talking about how to launch a pay-per-click campaign, specifically Google Ads or AdWords or whatever you want to call it.
It's AdWords.
Okay, sorry. You should call yourself Google Ads Girl.
No, I call myself AdWords Girl because AdWords is what it's called. I don't care. Everybody used to have we had this whole debate on Twitter, I think a little while ago, where everyone was saying that it should be, everyone has to call it Google Ads, and I flat out refused. It's like, that's not happening.
You're like, I'm not changing my username. I have it reserved on everything.
I get so many comments on my username because they're like, you're an OG. And I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, I am.
So we're going to talk about launching a PPC campaign. Ameet's going to go over 5 steps, and I'll just outline the steps for you right now, and then she'll get into detail. How to time your time for maximum impact. Picking a launch date, like why that's so important. Setting a target CPA, so cost per acquisition. Conversion tracking, and then drop, double, triple, quadruple check. So Ameet, do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah, so this one, I mean, it's a nice to have, but it doesn't always happen because sometimes clients kind of spring new campaigns on you and they're like, it needs to go up tomorrow. So this one is kind of like take with a grain of salt or do it if you've got the time for it. And that's basically kind of using tools like Google Trends to gauge seasonality in products. So if you know that a campaign is going to run really, really well in Christmas because it's something that a lot of people want, you can kind of start looking at Google Trends to figure out when exactly people start to search. So studies have suggested it, and so has Google Trends, where people start actually looking for Christmas gifts in like early to mid-November. But a lot of people end up running their campaigns in December. So they've missed about 2 to 3 weeks of time that people could have bought stuff from them, but they just weren't aware. So using Google Trends is really a smart move on any campaign's part, just to make sure that you're actually hitting everything when it should be. But then also it gives you a better idea of how much further back you need to start the campaign. So like sometimes starting at like 3 months before it actually has the seasonality, or before the seasonality or like the peak of it, I guess, really starts, is always a great idea, because then you can take those 3 months, set up the campaign, but then also you can optimize it, see what's converting, see what's not. So when it's time to actually put in more money, you actually get the best bang for your buck at that point.
So let's say you're running ads for like a real estate agent. How would you even check the trend? Like, how would you use Google Trends to check like when people are buying houses?
You can just put in a couple keywords that they would be interested in, right? And then you can actually see it. So I don't know enough about real estate, so I'm going to make some super like general assumptions.
Yeah.
But like say somebody comes to you and they're like, we want to start a campaign and it's November. It might be better to actually do it in maybe February, because in December everyone's buying gifts for all their family and friends and taking trips. They don't have the money to actually go ahead and be like, yeah, I can save cash and put a down payment down on this house in December. That's not going to happen, and everyone's recovering in January. So the logical step would be to start the campaign in February.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that's actually how their seasonality is too. So
exactly. So yeah. I mean, we could go back 3 months and say, let's start in October, but at that point, it would just be a smaller budget just to find out what's converting and what's not. But because real estate is something that's literally year round, there isn't really much of a need to do something like that, because you're gonna be able to optimize throughout the year anyways.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And then the next one was picking a soft launch date. What is that? Like, how do you even tell me?
So picking a launch date, like actually picking a date that the campaign's going to launch, is pretty crucial, especially if you have clients that kind of like to drag their feet with stuff. So giving them a deadline has always been really great for me. But unfortunately, right now, I don't really have that luxury. Everyone just kind of throws campaigns at me, and I go, okay, well, we'll do it. But the idea behind soft launches is essentially that you're launching that campaign 7 to 14 days before the actual hard launch date, and you're going to take about 10%, maybe 20. I've heard of people doing 30, but I think that's a bit too much. And that's a percentage of the ad spend, and you're going to put it towards the soft launch. And what you do is you essentially just start running that campaign, obviously at a much tighter budget, and you get to see what actually performs and what doesn't. So by the time you're actually willing, or not willing, but when you're ready to actually put the rest of that budget, so that 80 to 90% left, you're actually going to have a campaign that's a bit more leaner than what you started with. So you'll actually be able to invest money in places that you know will actually give you a return or won't be costing you a ton of money right from the start, versus dumping a bunch of cash and then finding out afterwards.
How much time before the actual launch date should you have your soft launch?
I would say 7 to 14 days.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then at least you can actually start updating your keyword list sooner than later as well. So another way to save you a ton of money, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Let's talk about cost per acquisition. How do you even decide what that's going to be?
So that one is a little bit of math, and I'm going to have to read off my little cheat sheet because I kind of sometimes forget it. But it's some of my favorite stuff to do because I honestly love math. But having like a target CPA is obviously super crucial. I think a lot of campaigns start without it. And that's always a little of a murky point because you're kind of just shooting in the dark. And even when you ask clients, they go, oh, maybe like $100. And you're like, you sell products for $100,000. You might be able to, afford quite a bit more. Yeah. So it's kind of nice to be able to just kind of do the math out and then give yourself a little bit of leeway. And then obviously at one point or another, you can bring that down to that $100, but you might need to do something that's actually significantly more, if that makes any sense. So basically what you're doing is you're going to take like the average transaction value or like the revenue amount. So let's say like I really hope I'm going to be able to follow the math if I do it out loud. So let's say $100 is the transaction value. And then you subtract it by how much it costs to produce the product or the service. So say it takes, I don't know, $40 to actually produce it. Then you also subtract, the estimated fixed costs. So like the operating budgets for businesses. So say that's another, I don't know, $10 or something. And then that would equal, that's $50. So that equals your fixed cost it equals your gross profit. And then basically what you end up doing is that you subtract what you want your margin to be or what your desired profit to be. So say I want to make 25%, I would take $25 off of that gross profit, and then I'm left with $25, and that's my CPA.
Okay.
So that means that I have to get everything done, or I need to get that person from click to converted within $25.
So what if you're like, okay, I'm like your CPA is $25, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then what if your client's like, that's too high?
You can obviously work towards bringing it down, but I think it's more or less of just kind of showing them the math and how you kind of came up to it. And this is obviously work that you're going to do with the client, because I don't know what their desired net profit is going to be until I ask them what it is.
Yeah.
So if they're telling me they want to make $25 off of one transaction as a net profit, then I'm left with $25 to actually get that CPA. And then and you just convey the point that you can actually bring that down lower if you need to, or in the future, but at least hitting that target initially is what you're going to go for.
Okay. So like with social, there's like vanity metrics. So what are the metrics that actually matter for putting in CPA? Was it that the estimated fixed costs and stuff like that? Or is that what you mean by the metrics that matter? Or
Yeah, so those are probably the metrics that would matter in this case would obviously be just the CPA, but also considering CPC. So there's another whole formula for that side of it, I guess, right? Where you're going to consider what your CPA is, but then you're also considering what your conversion rate is. And then from there, you're able to determine what your CPC can be. So your click through, or not your click through, sorry, your cost per click. So then you can get much more granular with the keywords that you're using and figure out if it's going to cost you as much as it says that it's going to cost you. So say your max CPC can be $5. If I've got one that's costing me $6, I might not want to use it anymore, or I might want to discover ways to actually reduce that. So there's a bit more math that's involved in all of it that I am obviously not leading.
I'm the worst at math, so you're like blowing my mind.
Love math so much. But yeah, it's when you're determining target CPA, you're looking at your fixed costs, your producing costs, your operating costs, and then how much you want to make off that transaction at the end of the day. That will help lead you to determining what the CPA should be.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Oh, we answered my questions. And then the fourth step out of the 5 was ensure conversion tracking's in place.
I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a campaign and there's no conversion tracking.
But then what's the point of even...
There isn't. There really is no reason to do a campaign without conversion tracking. I firmly believe that. And I don't understand how people get away with doing it or running campaigns without any conversion tracking. And especially when it's not funneled into AdWords, because then you're not able to make those like really smart decisions. You're not able to get super granular. You're not able to do a lot of things. I think a lot of people tend to just leave it in Google Analytics and they leave it at that. And I think that's a big mistake. For me, Google obviously Analytics is a great place to start tracking conversions, but I love Google Tag Manager or GTM to actually track everything, because you can get super granular and really creepy with what you're doing. So you can track if somebody downloads a PDF at a certain point, or if they've only been on the page for 30 seconds, scroll depth, a lot of really cool stuff that I'm obviously not listing because they're not coming to my head right now, but and then taking that information and funneling it into Google AdWords is usually what I tend to do. And then, of course, the Facebook pixel. So that way you have all the information that you need at whatever given point. Because really, at this point, you're supposed to be making money off of AdWords, not just dumping a ton of it into it. And I do understand there are awareness campaigns, but there's still metrics that you want to follow, or you have certain KPIs that you need to hit. And you're not going to be able to do that if you don't have conversion tracking in place.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And like, it's surprising how many people don't have Google Analytics or the Facebook pixel or like anything on their website.
Yeah, it's a bit alarming, but at the same time, I think it's an education problem too. I think a lot of these guys are just starting their own little thing, and then they don't really consult anybody, and that's also a problem. But I mean, we can't really do much about that. It's more or less of the agencies that don't put in the right steps, I guess.
But even like when you hire a web designer, like they just focus on the design, but like, and then they will just do the page, and it's like, well, shouldn't you just know to have these things? But I don't know, whatever.
You would think that. You definitely would think that. And I would like to run the assumption that a developer should be the one who actually implements the conversion tracking, because they're already in the site. But I don't know. It depends on the person, really, at the end of the day.
That's true.
Yeah.
And then, so talk about how triple checking, quadruple checking, 100,000 checking is important.
I've got a story that does not shine me in a great light. It was about, let's see, 5 years ago, I think. I was working for an auto dealership, and we basically owned a bunch of like car dealerships, right? So they were like a parent company. So I was managing all their campaigns, and I think at that point I was about 58 of them. And it was like $4.3 million or something along those lines. And there was this one campaign out in Victoria. The guy who owned that dealership was such a pain in the ass. But it is what it is. And one day, the VP of marketing comes in and goes, I want to do a display campaign for him. You have to do the display campaign for him. And I kind of went, okay, that's fine. Obviously protested because I didn't think it was a good idea, but he kept on telling me that he knew better. So I listened. He gave me all the creative, did everything. I put it up, didn't double check anything, or triple check or even check what I was doing because I was under so much pressure. And I think it was like a week later, we discovered that I had wasted $4,800. Because I forgot to exclude mobile apps. So a bunch of little kids kept on pressing on the down.
Well, I mean, life lesson, right?
It was the worst. It took me forever because he was like, why did we spend so much money? And I kind of just sat there and I looked at it and I was like, I don't know. And then we saw this spike in calls, so I thought it was that. And I was like, well, if it's returning, then who gives a shit? And then I discovered that I think those calls were coming from something else or something like that. I don't really remember. And then I remember going through the reports and then I finally spotted it and I was like, uh-oh, this was not good. So obviously, like I think we canned the campaign in general, or I might have just excluded mobile. I can't quite remember. But yeah, good story.
Triple check.
Triple check your shit.
Check it a billion times.
I literally, it's a habit of mine now. I go through it. Sometimes I'll get some of my contractors to go through it. And they're like, we've already looked. And I'm like, do it again.
I mean, like, yeah, mistakes happen. And then you just learn from them, right? So it made you a better
person. You just become like super paranoid and have tons of trauma from it. Like,
yeah. PTSD, maybe. Just a few comments from people. Brian said, yes, it's very good to be specific with your developers. So in regards to setting up Google Analytics and stuff. And then go sidecar.ca said, old school, they just hope, sorry, it keeps closing on me. It's good to be specific with they just hope sales are going up a correlative amount. So instead of like, oh, there's no conversion tracking, they're just like, please notice an increase in sales somehow. But I think it's on their own front. I think he's saying that some web development companies, I shouldn't say all, but some web development companies just care more about their bottom line than anybody else's, which is incredibly true because, I mean, I've been preaching that for, God, I don't even know how long now. For agencies in general, so it's not really a shocking revelation on that part. That's also because you have experience working at agencies too, right?
It's unfortunate.
Wink. If anyone has questions for Ameet, you can feel free to ask them. We still have 5 minutes left. I was going to ask you about what if your client is like, I don't want to tell you what our profit margin is for when you're picking your cost per acquisition. Like they're very like, I'm not telling you. So then how do you figure it out?
Then you're basically shooting in the dark at this point. You're going to just set up a campaign and look at what the CPA ends up being at the end of it all and then just try to decrease it from there. I don't know. A lot, like, I haven't really had that much of an issue with it for the most part. Like the agency clients that I've had, the ones that we white label for, we don't really do it for because they won't get the information that we need for them. Sometimes they just can't. And it's too much of a, what's the term that I'm looking for? Like there's too many people in the mix to be able to actually sort that out. But for the clients that we do have, they do a lot of high ticket items. So it's kind of easy enough to sit there and be like, okay, well, we want to spend $100, even though you guys make significantly more off of it. And then you kind of just work backwards from there.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have questions for Ameeters? She's here now. Might as well just ask her. Why do people say we're twins?
Somebody said that we're sisters. I read it like twice.
Because we both have glasses, maybe.
And round faces.
Yes, that's mean. My face is very narrow. So, I mean, we talked about this on a previous episode about like specialists versus generalists. And what have you found just in your past with generalists who do AdWords, but they also do like all the other things in the whole entire world? Like, what's the difference between a specialist and a generalist in terms of the quality of work?
I think that's literally the difference. It's the quality of work. And I don't mean to say it in like a rude fashion. I just mean that, like, how are you supposed to know everything?
Yeah.
Like, about several different topics. You can know everything about one topic. I firmly believe that you can. But I don't believe that one person can know everything about several topics or actually have a working knowledge of everything. Which is basically why I stopped being a generalist, because I couldn't. I had no interest in SEO. I hated it. I was like, what the fuck is the point of this? And I have no interest in social media. If you follow my accounts, you'll definitely tell.
You love Twitter.
I just like sit there and just tweet out random thoughts. That's basically it. And apparently that works. So, like sometimes I find it so stressful because I'm like, I have nothing to say today and I don't know what to do. But I think that's the difference, right, between people. It's just essentially what you're interested in. And I think me choosing PPC was easier because numbers make sense to me. And if I could talk to people in binary code, I would. And then,
I feel like it would take you really long to be like 001110.
I would actually enjoy it more than using words. I can firmly, like, I know that I would. Because I feel like numbers just make more sense. Like, it's either a yes or a no. Like, there's never any gray area with it, and I really, really enjoy that. Versus contextually, it can be misconstrued as anything. And I have a tendency to be taken out of context quite a bit. So numbers sound really appealing to me.
So that's how you live your life? It's either yes or no?
It really kind of is, actually, yeah. It's either all in or not, but I think that's the same thing where a generalist isn't all in and a specialist is.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Get Social Yeg agrees, do what you're great at. So you're great at AdWords. I've done AdWords before and I wanted to kill myself because I was like, what is this?
I've heard that from so many people and I don't get it. Makes no sense.
Well, I don't know. Whatever. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to get more followers on social media. And I was joking with Ameet the other day and I was like, it's going to be a 1-minute broadcast and I'm just going to be like, go buy them. No, don't buy them. I mean, you can buy them. Like, before I was very like, don't fucking buy followers, blah, blah, blah. It's against best practices. But really, like, if you're a politician, maybe those vanity metrics help you win the race. But
you're basically giving away next week's episode.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, someone's hearting us. Aww.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, do you have anything in closing that you would like to say to your audience about PPC and the launch checklist that we just basically went through?
No, I think all the steps are actually pretty crucial in launching a campaign.
Let me go through them just for the people who kind of joined at the end. The 5 steps we went through today were how to time your time for maximum impact, picking a launch date, setting a target CPA, so cost per acquisition, conversion tracking, and then don't forget to fucking double check your shit. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.